Is it true that because abortion is the problem that it is today, therefore we need national conservatism or Christian nationalism? We need some form of neo-Puritan nanny state, which is going to take control not only over banning abortion, which of course I agree with, punishing all those involved, which of course I agree with, but we're talking about taking control of other aspects of society as well. So for instance, the neo-Puritan nanny statists would argue that the government ought to be led by some prince or magistrate or elected official who is a Reformed Christian and who would ensure that the public school system would continue telling the populace what is true and how to think, but would switch out the woke religion for the true religion. Which true religion? I guess we can fight about that later. That's what they all seem to say. We know what they have in mind, though. Stephen Wolfe, in his book and in his interviews, has said that he thinks that if somebody is preaching that the Trinity is not a true doctrine, they should be put in jail for a very long time. He believes in blasphemy laws, heresy laws, Sabbath laws, neo-Puritan nanny statism. We are talking about wanting the government to be in control of people's private morality in many, many ways. Now, I agree generally with the idea that the government needs to be led by Christians. I think that the way that we put Christians in control of the government matters. I don't think that there should be a faith test. But I do think that we should all be smart enough to only vote for Christians, and real Christians. I'm a dominionist, broadly speaking. I believe in the Bible's teaching about the fact that by man, the murderer's blood must be shed. And therefore, I believe in taking some kind of dominion. Some kind. But does that make me a theocrat or a theonomist? No. The question is, where does the government rightly have power and why? Everybody would draw a line between vice and crime at some point. And Stephen Wolfe, or the Christian nationalists, or Yoram Hazony and the National Conservatives, would draw the line in a far different place than the Founding Fathers would have drawn it. How much oversight ought the government to have over people's lives? I'm not only talking about controlling the school system and controlling it for the sake of propagating social conservatism, which is a dangerous prospect, I think. I'm not just talking about the public school system. I'm talking about these people would attempt to have the government have total control over the internet. After all, that is necessary in order to achieve their goal of banning pornography. So we're talking about there would be no exchange of information in this country unless the government had some kind of ability to look at it. Is that what we want? There are moral and practical reasons why we ought to be concerned about this sort of policy. Historically, has it gone well when the government had that much power? Do the people that are currently in Washington, D.C. seem to be trustworthy? Do the people that are currently advocating for this national conservatism idea seem to be trustworthy? I mean, you saw what happened in the Thomas Acord affair, where they lied and they slandered those people that were telling the truth about what Thomas Acord was doing. They knew. They made a good case. But all along the way, they were attacked. And they were attacked by the people that today are wanting to be in charge of teaching you about the theocracy and the justice that ought to be established on the earth. These people don't know very much about justice. Aaron Vineyard did a good job pointing that out. He said Christians who built their platforms railing against the problems within Christendom should not be advocating for Christendom to have so much secular power that they can silence bad viewpoints. You can see the logic of the argument there. It's also, in a way, it's a tu quoque, like a heart check type of an argument. Like, hey, are you really the right person to be making these decisions? But it's not just that. It's also, look at the logic of his statement. If Christendom is capable of becoming corrupt such that you need to create Canon Press and Blog and Mablog and the Doug Wilson stuff, if it's such a problem that you need someone like that to come in and speak the truth to the church, then do you really think the church needs to be in charge of things like whether or not people are allowed to preach this or that? Is the church a trustworthy enough institution to be given the sword? Or is the state ever going to be a holy enough institution to be entrusted with the keys of the kingdom? Shouldn't there be a separation? Now I want to present to you an argument that I saw on Twitter. This is from Lila Rose, thousands of likes. She says, "We are not going to end abortion in this country unless we change our sexual ethics." What do you think about that? How would you answer her statement there? Is she right? Is she wrong? I think there's a lot of truth in that. I mean, I think that word for word, that's a correct statement. People do need to change their ethics. I'm not sure how I would categorize abortion as being related to sexual ethics specifically. I think it might be more of a broader issue. I mean, murdering unborn children is not merely a sexual issue, although clearly sex is involved. I mean, I think there may be some things we could say about how you could theoretically change people's, I don't know, you could change what they're able to do, make it so that it's impossible to get abortions, and still people would behave in sexually immoral ways. On the other hand, you could argue that there is a connection, that people's overall approach to morality is responsible for the fact that we have so many abortions in this country. Sure. Now, I think that I see the beginning in her statement of what could turn into a syllogistic argument that seems to bear some strength rhetorically in favor of the national conservative or Christian nationalist, their conception of justice, and especially of what needs to be done in the world today. So let me offer my understanding of what I think they might do with this. So she says that we're not going to end abortion in this country unless we change our sexual ethics. And I think that people might say, yes, that's true, and also we're not going to change our sexual ethics without some form of energetic government control of public morality. And that must include common sense laws banning this, this, and this, and this, where that would be lots of things other than just banning abortion and punishing the perpetrators. We're talking about, like I mentioned, the government controlling the school system in order to indoctrinate people according to correct orthodoxy, but also making it so that there's no freedom of information in the country in order to ban pornography. Perhaps making it so that there's no freedom of information in the country for other reasons as well. You can imagine this happening, right? I mean, what happens when they say, well, I want to ban this guy's book because this book says that abortion should be a right, but they don't think so. Long term, I think that it's very likely that theocrats are going to be in charge of this country. I think it's very likely. And if they ever do get in control, that control could last for 1,000 years. I think that people like Obama, with their nihilism and their deconstructive attitude, will never be a lasting power in the world. But I think that in the Middle Ages, the Catholic Church was in a position of great power for centuries and centuries. And I think you could have something like that again. And I think that that's, to some degree, what a lot of these people are looking for, a return either to the Middle Ages or to the age of the great Protestant Reformation. So, of course, it's no surprise that I would call them the Neo-Puritan nanny-statists. So I think that their conception of what needs to be done is going to be, like I said, banning porn, but also they would change the laws around divorce. I'd probably agree with them on that. They would also get rid of this farce called same-sex marriage. I agree with them on that. I think they might even ban extramarital sex. That's a possibility. I wouldn't agree with them on that. I don't even think that they can find that in the Old Testament. To a degree they could, I suppose. It's a bit of a weird interpretive issue to figure out exactly how that all applies today as far as should the state be in charge of that. But I think their overall argument is going to be something like this. Just nations are good and necessary for human life. Energetic government control of public morality is necessary for just nations. Therefore, it follows that energetic government control of public morality is necessary for human life. Now, everything rests on the definitions, doesn't it? I think that their definition of a just government and this energetic government control of public morality, I think it amounts to a theocracy, a theonomy, some kind of statism, like you see in Stephen Wolfe. Energetic, that's a word I got from Yoram Hazony. That's his own word about how he thinks that the state should approach people's moral decisions, their private moral decisions. I think that's how the argument works. So, what do you think when you hear that argument? Am I characterizing it correctly? Is it right? Is it a good argument? How would you know? How would you determine what the state's proper role is and is not? When you look at the fact that people's morality in public and in private is getting worse, do you agree with these statist conservatives? Do you think that statism, more government control, is going to be the answer across the board in many areas or in some areas? How would you answer? It's a conversation that is worth having. Leave a comment, and I would love to read what you have to say. Thank you for watching today, and God bless.